know who I am. I've been a public figure since I was 26 years old, and others may not. I'm a long-standing best-selling feminist author. I've written 9 best-selling books, translated in European languages of many kinds, and I was a Rhodes Scholar. I got a DPhil at Oxford University in English literature. I'm not a medical doctor, but I am a journalist. I've appeared in every major news site. I was a columnist for The Guardian and for the Sunday Times of London and so on. But all of that didn't matter. In June of 2021, which covered women's reproductive health, when I noted that we were reporting eyewitness accounts of their bodies, which is, as a feminist, you're supposed to be allowed to listen to women about their bodies. They were reporting eyewitness accounts of menstrual damage upon having received the mRNA injection. And literally, that was my post. And overnight, I was canceled from X, Twitter at that time, canceled from Facebook, YouTube. My bio changed around the world simultaneously, which is interesting. I didn't think AI had rolled out then, but something did that. Went from, Rhodes Scholar, doctorate at Oxford, to conspiracy theorist. And overnight, every major news outlet that had published me and featured me for 40 years closed their doors to me, and I was literally voiceless. So that doesn't really matter what happened to me personally, except that a warning signal that women around the world were entitled to have received about their own bodies and reproductive health was intentionally silenced. And I found out later, during lawsuits brought by the state's attorneys general of the state of Missouri and of Louisiana, that it was people for whom I had voted, the Biden administration, notably senior people at the CDC, the Census Bureau, which knows where I live, I'm related to, other agencies, including law enforcement agencies, that had colluded to put pressure on Twitter and Facebook and other social media sites to silence my tweet and to discredit me. And that was very terrifying, to find out the most powerful government in the world had singled you out. And by the way, we have a First Amendment in the United States, thank God. And 2 courts now have found that or 2 settlements have found that my constitutional First Amendment rights were violated, and that the Biden administration had no legal right to silence a citizen, but that happened. So as a journalist, I realized that there must be a story here, because why go to so much trouble to suppress this simple tweet of mine? And in 2022, as you described, the successful lawsuit by attorney Aaron Siri led to the forced release of 450,000 documents from Pfizer in the custody of our FDA. Now, I was only being hosted at that time by Steve Bannon, the far right-wing commentator. Another example of, I don't agree with Bannon on a lot of issues. I'm still a liberal, but he cared about what was happening to women and children. So I was talking on his show about these issues, and he said, these documents will be lost to history. Of course, you're going to convene a group of experts to go through them. And I said on the air, of course I am, not having any experience in doing that. But miraculously, 3,500 doctors and scientists did convene and worked for 2.5 years pro bono in service of humanity, but also out of love for science and medicine, to read through these massive documents, technical documents, and to issue what are now 105 reports. 50 of them are in that book, if you would kindly hold it up at some point. And we published them in real time. Now, before I tell you what's in the Pfizer documents, I just want to note that it's been 2.5 years since we began publishing these reports, and we have not received a lawyer's letter from Pfizer. So what is reported is accurate. No one from Pfizer is telling us to cease and desist. It's accurate. And also, it's not my opinion. I just want to stress that. I'm not the author of this book, I'm an editor of it. Amy Kelly is the leader of the effort, my COO. But what's in this book are reports that link directly to the primary documents. So if you have any doubt about any conclusion in any of these reports, you can link, you can check the Pfizer documents and see for yourself what that primary document looks like. All right, so what's in the Pfizer documents? First of all, and I think this is very important for you as MEPs, Pfizer knew a month into the rollout into the public of this injection, so November of 2020, that this vaccine did not work to stop COVID. And I want you to process that and absorb that. It means that everything that followed, the mandates, the lost jobs, the businesses that had to close, the children not allowed to go back to school or university if they didn't take the shot, right? The armed forces compelled to take the shot, the pilots compelled. All of that followed, the two-tier society, the suppression of liberties, was predicated on a lie. It didn't stop COVID, concluded Pfizer. The efficacy and vaccine failure. And the most common side effect of getting vaccinated is COVID. So everything that followed was a lie. Second, they knew that the injection did not stay in your deltoid. I'm sure that Europeans, probably through the EMA, the European Medicines Agency, like our FDA, or other public health entities, told people here, if you have side effects, it's likely to be chills, fever, a little fatigue. You may need to lie down. No, Pfizer knew that and they said that the material stay in the injection site. They knew that was a lie. In fact, in the Pfizer documents, there are charts showing that the materials, the spike protein, the mRNA, the lipid nanoparticles, which is a petroleum byproduct, rather polyethylene glycol, a petroleum byproduct surrounding lipid nanoparticles, an industrial fat, they didn't stay in the deltoid. They biodistribute within 48 hours, and they leave the injection site and biodistribute to major organs throughout the body. They cross the blood-brain barrier. You may have noticed personality changes in some of your loved ones who took this injection, but they also accumulate in the liver, the adrenals, the spleen, the lymphatic system, and if you're a woman, they accumulate in your ovaries. And so this is an industrial fat accumulating in women's ovaries, right? So the first injection accumulates in your ovaries. The second injection, more accumulates in your ovaries. Our experts could not find any mechanism whereby this material left the body, male or female. So by the first booster, people are already reporting when they do surgery on vaccinated women that they're fully blocked ovaries, okay, as well as other kinds of damage. Pfizer knew that. Pfizer knew that they had to hire 2,400 full-time staff in order to process the reports of serious adverse events they were already starting to receive. And indeed, within the Pfizer documents, it's a 3 period of time, end of November of 2020 to February of 2021. Well, that tallied up over 42,000 serious adverse events. Many individuals had multiple serious adverse events, and just an overwhelming number of side effects that were not fever and chills, but in fact, things you were not told about. So the number one side effect in the Pfizer documents is something called myalgia, which is muscle pain. How many people do you know who just feel bad? Well, Pfizer knew they would feel bad. Doctors are baffled, myalgia. The second most common side effect is joint pain, because these injections are inflammatory. And Pfizer knew that. What is arthritis? What is joint pain? Tendon pain, it's inflammatory. How many people do you know who are limping or had to have knee replacements, hip replacements, shoulder replacements? Young, healthy people, many of them. Pfizer knew. The third most common side effect, as I mentioned, is COVID. But after that, there is a catastrophic industrial scale tallying of horrifically serious side effects, notably heart damage, myocarditis, pericarditis, problems with aortas, great deal of blood damage, thrombotic thrombocytopenia, blood clots, lung clots, leg clots. These lipid nanoparticles create clotting in the body. Everyone knew that about lipid nanoparticles before this mRNA, who worked with them. Florid neurological events. Our experts found that the lipid nanoparticles strip the myelin sheath from nerves, which is how electricity is conducted in a nerve impulse. So, of course, you're getting tremors. How many people do you know who now have tremors? You're getting Guillain-Barré. You're getting dementias, epilepsy-type seizures, horrific neurological events. And also autoimmune disorders of all kinds, lupus-type disorders, because now we know these injections damage the immune system. Also things that would surprise you, a huge amount of eye damage, blindness, eye damage of all kinds. And in addition to all of these side effects, miscarriages, I'll get into the reproductive damage, 1,200 deaths in 3 months. And these are not statistically random people who happened to have died. They were old, they had prior conditions. 1,200 deaths that doctors let Pfizer or the authorities know needed to be recorded because there was some causality they were concerned about. Other smoking guns, you call this the smoking gun. 2 of our reports show, in my view, causality. Half of the liver and the stroke serious adverse events took place 48 hours after the injection, including deaths. Pfizer knew this. Okay. Pfizer knew by April of 2021 that minors were being injured by this vaccine, specifically myocarditis and pericarditis, heart damage. Never before have we had healthy young people dropping dead on plate. But what Pfizer knew was that 35 minors had sustained heart damage. Indeed, one of the most scandalous things that our work has surfaced is that the FDA knew, the CDC knew, Dr. Walensky knew by April of 2021. The Israeli Ministry of Health was trying to tell the CDC and the Biden administration that minors were having their hearts damaged. And instead of, we did a Freedom of Information Act request to for the Biden records at that time, mentioning myocarditis. And we found that there was active conversation, including to POTUS, right, surfacing all the way up potentially to the White House. 15 White House staffers, Dr. Walensky, Dr. Fauci, the head of HHS, all on these communications where they were talking about myocarditis in minors following the shot. But instead of saying, we have to pull this, we have to tell the parents of America, and by extension the world, that they must save their children and young adults from this risk, they were deciding how to spin a cover-up. And they issued a 17-page document that even after the FOIA is completely redacted, which was a script that they used to spend the next 3 months of summer telling parents to get their minors injected. And indeed a big influencer TikTok campaign encouraging young adults and minors to get injected. And they knew that kids would sustain what is often deadly heart damage from these injections. They knew. And in fact, Senator Ron Johnson, now under this administration, is using our work to unredact those documents and to shine a light on that cover-up. He had hearings about it. Pfizer knew all of these things, but all these side effects, all this damage isn't the most shocking, surprising thing in the Pfizer documents, and I'll tell you what is. COVID is a respiratory infection, so you would expect a lot of information in Pfizer documents about lungs, about oxygen levels, about mucous membranes. No, there's almost nothing about respiratory issues in the Pfizer documents. What there is is a 360-degree obsessive focus on ruining human reproduction. Sperm, ruining fallopian tubes, ruining ova, ruining placentas, ruining fetuses in utero, ruining the birth process, ruining lactation. That's what they were studying. That's what they were focused on. Why is that? Why did they take male and female rats, male vaccinated, female unvaccinated, mate them, sacrifice the rats, and examine the cells of their sex organs for a respiratory infection? Why is that? Overwhelmingly, the focus is on ruining human reproduction. So let me just give you some examples. They knew, as I mentioned, that it blocks the ovaries, which could contribute to the menstrual damage that I mentioned. But they also knew, as I mentioned, that the lipid nanoparticles, which are designed to cross every membrane in the body, what is a membrane? The placenta is a membrane. The lipid nanoparticles traverse the placenta of women who were told in my country to get this injection during their pregnancies, violating decades of knowledge about how to not hurt babies in utero, right? You don't give the pregnant woman anything. But women were told to inject this, traverses the placenta. It causes calcifications in the placenta, which prevent the baby from getting nutrients and oxygen. And in fact, in my country, midwives independently are reporting to me, leaking to me. As a journalist, we have multiple independent reports. There's a story there that babies are being born early because the placentas cannot grow normally. And people are nodding. They're seeing the same thing, no doubt, in Europe, where there are reports that the placentas are flat. They send me pictures, not normal, supplied with blood and oxygen. And so babies have to be delivered early. So standard. Well, it's not that easy to deliver a baby from a mother whose placenta has been impaired. Placentas are falling apart in the delivery process. What does that mean? It means women are hemorrhaging during childbirth or retaining part of the placenta, which is so dangerous. And so maternal fetal mortality, women dying in childbirth in the West, which had largely solved this deadly problem of the past in other parts of the world, is up by 40% since the injections. Pfizer knew. Pfizer knew that the lipid nanoparticles would go into the baby, and again, what's a membrane? They knew that the lipid nanoparticles would traverse the membrane around the testes of baby boys in utero, thus degrading the Leydig cells and Sertoli cells of baby boys of vaccinated moms. Even if the babies are not vaccinated, they're getting this from their moms. So what does that do? Sertoli cells and Leydig cells are the factories of masculinity. Hormones, they switch on the hormones of masculinity at adolescence, triggering what we think of as a traditional adult male development, deep voices, broad shoulders, body hair, facial hair, and as an adult, the ability to father a child successfully. Well, we don't even know if these baby boys in utero at adolescence will grow into normal, fertile adult males, even if they're never vaccinated with this mRNA injection. But Pfizer knew they were damaging the testes of baby boys in utero. They knew they were damaging sperm. An andrology report confirmed that the injection killed motility of sperm in men. And to this day, and this is a job for you all, I believe, to this day, there's something Pfizer knows about dangers to women in vaccinated men's sperm that they're not disclosing. In the Pfizer documents, there's a warning to men who are subjects of the study not to have intercourse if they were vaccinated with unvaccinated women of childbearing age, and if they did, to use 2 reliable forms of contraception. 2, Pfizer defines exposure to the vaccine as including, right, shedding is supposed to be a conspiracy theory, as including skin contact, breath, and body fluids, such as semen. And to this day, we don't know what that is, right? We know that women, anecdotally, are having horrible cramps, real problems with when they have intercourse with vaccinated husbands. We don't know why Pfizer said don't do that. I can tell you one hypothetical a little further on. Um, they told women in the study not to get pregnant. Nonetheless, 270 women got pregnant in the study, vaccinated women. Now, 234 of them, the records of what happened to that pregnancy were lost, which is illegal. Pfizer is supposed to follow them through pregnancy. However, of the 36 women who gave birth, over 80% of them lost their babies. Over 80%. Pfizer knew that. One of the most chilling things in the Pfizer papers is something called a pregnancy and lactation report. And I'm feeling like the heaviness in the room, and I empathize. You know, this is very dark news, but I also want to say there's a lot that can be done, and you all are in a beautiful position to do it. So please bear with me for the rest of this darkness, because you know this is very serious, but there are ways to engage with this information after you have it constructively. The pregnancy and lactation report is an 8-page document that was prepared specifically for the White House and given to Dr. Walensky, to the FDA, to the White House in April of 2021. Now, I am the daughter I'm the daughter and granddaughter of immigrants, but I'm the granddaughter of 2 people who lost 8 siblings in the Holocaust. And that's why I'm sitting here with you today, because if that wasn't part of our family's history, I wouldn't understand so clearly the importance of raising these warnings and calling attention to these atrocities. I've written about, and I know it's illegal in Germany, too bad. I'm going to use my American free speech. I'm in a free place. I've studied deeply the history of Nazi medicine. As a result, when I saw the pregnancy and lactation report as a Jew and as the granddaughter of people, part of whose family were wiped out by them, this was a very chilling and recognizable document. It had charts, very, very scientific, neutral, careful chart. But even superficial students of history, you know why I stress that. These careful charts show horrific damage to women and babies in the pregnancy and lactation report. There is a chart showing menstrual damage to tens of thousands of women, 15,000 women bleeding every day after being injected, 10,000 women having 2 periods a month, 7,500 women having no periods at all, meaning they're totally infertile, 10-year-old girls bleeding upon being injected, 85-year-old women bleeding upon being injected, women hemorrhaging, women passing clots, lives ruined, and certainly fertility ruined. All of it documented meticulously by Pfizer in the pregnancy and lactation report, which went to the White House and to Dr. Rochelle Walensky and the FDA. I'm quite sure if you investigate, you will find comparable charts that went to your leaders across Europe, because they were all on the same page. But I'm getting ahead of my story. Also in the pregnancy and lactation report is a chart showing that they experimented on babies and they knew it, and they experimented on at least 3 babies to death. Okay? This showed that babies who were nursing from vaccinated moms, these ones had vomiting, and these ones had edema, which is swollen tissues, and these ones had fever, and these ones had failure to thrive. They couldn't gain weight. These ones were inconsolable. I can never get that out of my head. One poor baby went into convulsions after nursing from a vaccinated mom, and then was rushed to the ER and died after multi-organ system failure. Her whole system shut down. What did they know? What is breast milk made of? I learned this in this process. It's made of out of the building blocks of lymph and blood. And so the lipid nanoparticles, the polyethylene glycol that are in the blood and lymph of vaccinated moms are turning into poisoned milk that is poisoning their babies. And Pfizer knew it. And to this day, the women of Europe don't know it. The women of America, for the most part, don't know it, unless they happen to have heard me or come up on this book. And so they're so at risk. And nursing, which is such an important part of human development and bonding and the immune system, has gone from 34% of all babies and moms to 14% of all babies and moms. And babies' first experience, I think we're going to see the damage of this in a generation, of human intimacy is poisoned nourishment now, and they don't have the words to say it to their moms or dads. But Pfizer knew. So this went to the White House, and 3 days later, on April 23rd, 2021, Dr. Rochelle Walensky, a mother, I should note, gave a White House press conference to the people of my nation, saying, with this in hand, there's no bad time to get your COVID mRNA injection before you get pregnant, during your pregnancy, or after your baby is born. She said that, knowing this. Lastly, in the pregnancy and lactation report, 2 babies died in utero, and Pfizer concluded that they died due to, quote, maternal exposure to the vaccine. So Pfizer knew that they were going to kill babies, that they were killing babies, and put them at risk. And fast forward, because I need to reach some of the conclusions of my talk. This is very predictable, what would happen. We're now 4 years after the rollout of this injection. And this book will show you this 360-degree attack on every aspect of human reproduction. Well, Igor Chudov, a mathematician and commentator, has analyzed government databases from about 20 different nations, including European nations. And vaccinated nations have lost 13 to 20% of their live births have dropped by that amount. And he calculates that in Europe, there are 1 million missing babies. We analyzed the government data from Canada, another terrible drop in live births. And now there was a big study from the Czech Republic, I believe, that also showed a dramatic drop in live births. And other studies are confirming what we began to publish in 2022, that vaccinated women are losing their eggs. They don't have the fertility of unvaccinated women. So this happened. This happened. And in spite of every effort, people, triprehensive support of this could have saved so many lives. I was just in Iceland. They are not at replacement levels for their own population. They now have 1.5 live births for every couple of 2 Icelanders. Icelanders will be extinct over time, God forbid, unless this can be reversed, unless we can study and treat the infertility that Pfizer and their allies brought about. So to conclude, because I know we need to take questions, why I have concluded very reluctantly that we can't attribute these horrors to, corporate greed, people moving too fast. If someone tries to tell you that, they're lying, right? If it was corporate greed, then month 1 or month 2 of seeing these deaths and side effects, Pfizer would have pulled, and your authorities would have pulled, Britain's authorities would have pulled, Canada's, Australia's, this technology. But they didn't. And by the way, lipid nanoparticles have been known to damage human fertility since 2017, and they chose to use them anyway. No, you can't conclude that this is an accident. You have to conclude, since year after year after year unfolded, knowing this damage, that Pfizer knew, your elected officials knew, your public health authorities knew. This is my speculation. I await an investigation. Our public health authorities knew, our elected officials knew, the FDA knew. There was collusion at the highest levels to make this happen. I'd love for it to be an accident or corporate greed, but it isn't. It is a mass murder. And again, I say this deeply knowingly as a Jew, as the granddaughter of Rosa and Joseph Wolf and all of their lost brothers and sisters. This is the greatest crime against humanity in recorded history, just numerically, because billions of people have been injected with this. So I will end by telling you why I believe it's a bioweapon, and that it was deployed, in effect, to reduce Western populations and influence. Number one piece of evidence is research I did that found that in 2021, there's an SEC filing, the Securities and Exchange Commission in my country, which is BioNTech, which is the subsidiary of Pfizer that produced this mRNA injection. And it is a memorandum of understanding, meaning an agreement, a legal agreement, that shows a partnership between BioNTech, which we're told is a German company, but it's not a German company, it's a German-Chinese company, because the partnership is with the Chinese Communist Party. The partnership is with Fosun Pharmaceuticals, which is one of the biggest pharma companies in China. And you all in any major company in China, it's the partners. Fosun create 1 billion doses of this injection for internal consumption. They use a different injection in China. They manufactured 1 billion doses to Western Europe and North America. And in the SEC filing, it specifies that the IP, intellectual property of the injection, is to be transferred. It doesn't say to a Chinese individual. It doesn't say to a Chinese company. It says to China. So since 2021, if you're taking an intervention that was formulated, manufactured, packaged, distributed by people who have stated that they want to be the world's hegemon by 2049, 100 years after the independence or the establishment of Chinese communist rule, and who have made war on the West in many other ways. And I don't think they're working alone. I think, there's alliances at levels that we can discuss, but just from my knowledge, that our enemies are making this injection. Also, the deployment, again, isn't random. There are 11 manufacturing plants in Western Europe, 14 now in North America. But the side effects are not random. And again, to me as a journalist, rather than as a doctor, this is very important evidence. Of the almost 43,000 serious adverse events in the Pfizer papers, they're not randomly distributed around the world. They're localized in Western democracies. And not only that, but this really caught my attention as a political consultant. The greatest number of serious adverse events are in the countries with the most influence in Western democracies. So over 42,000 in the United States, and then tranches of serious adverse events in European countries in December of political importance, population importance. So Germany, France, Britain, Italy, Spain, Greece, in that order. And then all the rest of the world, the other 52 countries of the world combined, amount to about 7,000 adverse events. And what I want to tell you is that it's very easy to target the value or the damage of these injections by manipulating things as simple as serious damaging particles as Pfizer, but Pfizer has more DNA contamination, as it's been discovered, or by manipulating things as simple as temperature. You remember that it was supposed to be, this material was supposed to be kept very, very cold, and then you stopped hearing about that. The materials coalesce at room temperature and at warmer temperatures. So I can't pursue that, right? This is beyond what's in the Pfizer papers. As a journalist, in spite of being called a conspiracy theorist worldwide, I do what I've always done, which is I stick to the facts. I don't go beyond what the evidence provides. But that evidence, to me, requires investigation. How do you take something that easily is manipulated to target populations, and you have these terrible losses and damage and infertility in Western nations? So I'll stop there. We can talk about what I think it means that other being made, but I will note, if I have a minute to conclude, that if you look with this analysis at who got mandated, certainly in my country, but I believe throughout Western Europe, but in my country, who got mandated? It was people, and you have a right to subpoena them, you have a right to see them, so what's preventing Europeans from seeing what's in those texts?
Let me answer that. That would be our despicable Ursula von der Leyen, who is corrupt to the very core of her being. She simply refuses to give out those texts. She has been admonished by so many authorities, whether it was the ombudswoman or whoever it was, Parliament. Now there's even a court ruling telling her that she was in violation of the EU treaties by refusing to share those texts. And unfortunately, the texts probably don't even exist anymore.
Well,
so, and that's that.
Let me
The
jump
thing
in
is,
there.
yeah.
As the tech CEO, I will just note that all texts still exist somewhere and are recoverable, even if she deleted them. I do hope we get through security going home. And I would also say that these are really cosmetic gestures and slaps on the wrist, censure. And now you know that a big crime may have been committed. So I would have thought that what I've shared with you could allow you to pursue criminal investigations. And I assume the rules of evidence give her fewer options in a criminal matter. But those may be evidence of a very major crime.